Trends in motion tend to stay in motion until they reach a climax or a crisis, at which point anything can happen. We're headed for a gigantic world crisis. If I'm right, the long-standing trend towards big tech getting bigger and more powerful won't continue. In other words, big tech is in the same position that big oil was in 1980. It looked like that sector was going to take over the world. Oil stocks were over 30% of the S&P 500. But today they're under 3%. Big business in general, now big tech in particular, have always had a very cosy relationship with big government. That's the way big government. The two of them fit together like hand in glove. Big government funnels contracts to big tech, and big tech acts as the state's handmaiden. It's part of why the average person has lost faith in government, corporations, and national institutions. They're now losing faith in the money as prices rise. When the stock market crashes, they'll lose faith in the financial markets too. Massive societal change is looming. But that doesn't mean the cultures of either big tech companies or the government are going to change. Throughout society, the elite are overwhelmingly statist and collectivist oriented. They're quite comfortable. They don't want to rock the boat. The big tech companies all started small, founded by entrepreneurial geniuses. Now, however, they are gigantic and mostly run by managers, suits, who have no skin in the game other than the shares they get through option grants. They are so large that they resemble dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous period. After a certain point, however, the bigger a company gets, the less efficient it becomes. It never seems to be able to be managed properly, and it falls apart. As the coming crisis unfolds, I think these companies are going to fall apart. Their share prices certainly will. The powers that be, the UN, the World Economic Forum, the European Union, and dozens of others like them, looks like a world government. That seems to be what the elite want, but I don't think they're going to get it. A bigger trend is the upcoming phenomenon of countries around the world actually breaking up. It's going to happen everywhere, including the US, which could divide into half a dozen or more separate entities. I've been saying this for years. Canada is increasingly dysfunctional and may well devolve into at least 3 or 4 countries. The same with Mexico and Brazil. It's already happening all over Europe. It happened in the USSR, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia. More division is on the way in Russia and Eastern Europe. This trend is going to continue. Secession happens when culturally and economically entities want to break off. Ultimately, as I said the other day, the nation-state was a bad idea, but it's had a pretty good run from the mid-1600s up to the present. It's outlived its usefulness. Neil Stephenson's idea of philes, that's P-H-Y-L-E-S, where people group themselves according to whatever is most important to them, is likely how most places are going to restructure themselves in the future. Unfortunately, individual freedom has been on an unbroken downward trend in the West for well over 100 years, especially starting with the reign of Teddy Roosevelt and the Progressives. The state has grown like a cancer. The Spanish-American War, the creation of the Federal Reserve, and the income tax, then World War I, cemented the trend in place. It's very true that war is the health of the state. This was followed by the New Deal with Roosevelt, who used the Depression and then World War II as excuses to put all kinds of restrictions on the economy in general and the individual in particular. Roosevelt is often touted as the so-called best US president, along with Lincoln. But from the point of view of individual freedom, they were actually the two worst. It's quite perverse. With personal freedom having been diminishing for the last 100 years, the big question is, when, if ever, is that trend going to change? Once again, I go back to the idea of this crisis which is on the way. Horrible people like Klaus Schwab of the WEF are quite anxious to see it and totalize the eschaton, as it were. They're right about the arrival of a great reset, but I hope they're wrong about the form it'll take. I think it'll be set off by the coming depression. Looking at technology again for a moment, here's the good news. Although throughout history technology has always been first in the hands of the state, in the hands of the rulers, it always devolves to the common man, where it's a genuine liberator. For instance, the bad guys got gunpowder first and used it to cement themselves in power starting in the 14th century. But after a while, the technology drifted down to the peasants. Gunpowder then allowed the common man to take out an armoured mounted knight. Although gunpowder, the technology drifted down to the peasants. Gunpowder then allowed the common man to take out an armoured mounted knight. Although gunpowder helped the rulers to start with, it overturned them in the end. The same is true of computers. At first, only governments and large corporations could afford computers. They used them to keep track of the plebs. But now everybody has a computer. It's more or less a level playing field, a two-way street. So don't worry about technology. It's always on the side of the average guy in the long run. When the singularity arrives in a generation or so, if Ray Kurzweil is right, the whole nature of life itself will be utterly changed. Forget about politics. Defunding the police is one notion now popular among leftists. It's happened in a number of cities to a degree. These people correctly see chaos as an ally, allowing them to take control. Of course, it's going to end very badly as crime goes through the roof. It seems to me that since genuine Bolsheviks are in charge in Washington, D.C., they'll use their newfound power as an excuse to create a national police force to replace the local cop, especially sheriff's departments, which generally relate to citizens better than the police. There are counter-trends where local people encourage their sheriffs not to enforce federal laws. The feds aren't going to like that. It's why they will promote a national police force. Something you can absolutely count on is more war. War serves we're going to have massive internal problems. It's also convenient to have a foreign enemy to blame for anything and everything. Lots more war is on the cards, even though the government is bankrupt and said to be withdrawing from Afghanistan. The new main event may well be in Africa. I suspect we're entering a major turning point in history. For instance, the world before World War I was totally different to what came after. The same was true before and after 1929 and before and after World War II. The Great Reset, catalyzed by the COVID hysteria, will make the world once again completely different. The good news is that it may not evolve the way leaders and the elite think it will. They're hoping to get more control through things like digital currency, mass urbanization, guaranteed annual income, UN-directed taxation, COVID passports, and the like. But there are counter-trends at play. Many people will avoid a Fed coin, preferring Bitcoin, other private cryptos. A lot of people will avoid the cities and go to small towns, which is decisively what the elite don't want. A guaranteed annual income will result in genuine class warfare between producers and consumers, destabilizing the government, as will tax revenues levied by the UN and COVID passports. There's an excellent chance we're going to see widespread secession, language and cultures are very different together in a big political pressure cooker doesn't work. Klaus Schwab hopes the world will transform into a place where people of his ilk completely dominate the 99.9%. It's possible, however, that the world order will fragment, not consolidate the way the globalists want. In conclusion, I would caution you not to believe anything you read in mass media newspapers and absolutely nothing you hear on television. It amounts to propaganda. If it's not actual propaganda, it's the blather of people who know nothing about either economics or history or science. Although they do understand mass psychology and they have strong political opinions. The most important thing to remember about the economy in the near future is that there is something called a business cycle. It's caused by money printing. COVID will be blamed as a deus ex machina caused for the depression, of course. The trillions of currency units that have been created for decades, but especially since 2008, have caused huge distortions in the financial markets and the economy. When they finally become unsustainable, and I believe we're at that point now, the result will be a tremendous drop in the average standard of living.